to our next topic, the future of media. And as you know, DLD is always also on the future of media, of ideas, of creativity. And our next session will be discussing where is the future of media. And at this session we take a particular view to that because we try to discuss this question from a female perspective. And this is really very relevant because all the session panelists, our dear panelists, are women who are in leadership positions at global media companies. And it's a very global panel from Europe, from the US, from Russia, from China, from Scandinavia. And that's one perspective we can bring, and we're really happy in the next hour. And the other perspective is that media is changing, and you see a lot now in media that this woman power we addressed, the influence, you see in new media, you see it on the internet basically. And this is another issue I think that will be explored. And before I call on stage our wonderful friend, moderator, DLDista from day one, Jochen Wegner, who will then introduce the panelists, let me say, Jochen, first of all, thank you that you do this panel again. And give a warm applause to Jochen. Thanks. And because you know that DLD is now in its 7th year, and it was Jochen who did, at the first year of DLD in 2005, a wonderful session with then Katharina Fake. Who knows Katharina Fake and Flickr? Who knows Flickr, basically? So, and it was really in 2005 when a woman was the first true innovator of the social media, of social media with Flickr, and then out of this idea came the award for creativity, which was given to many women after Marissa Mayer, Esther Dyson. And Jochen, you were basically the first one, and Jochen invited Katharina at this point and said, you should basically invite Katharina Fake, and you wrote a story with Focus magazine then on the social web, and then you moved over to become the chief editor of Focus Online, and the managing director of Focus Portal, and this is, I think, one of the fastest growing and leading news sites, and you're a true innovator in building new media products. So we're really happy that you will now do this panel, and please introduce our panelists and get started.
Ladies. So this is the most interesting DLD panel preparation I ever had. We had a lot of fun about, you know, the topic of this panel, which is about the future of media and the female view on this topic. And the discussion was something like, oh, is there a female view? We don't know yet. So I'm totally happy now because Doris Dury was here before and said, look at the process and everything will go wrong and it will be okay. So this is the panel with the no concept. It's really true. I was quite impressed by women entrepreneurs when it comes to digital media because my really first DLD panel ever was with not only with Katharina Fake, also Meg Urian, the founder of Blogger, was on the first panel 5 or 6 years ago. And I had the feeling that a lot of kind of new digital entrepreneurs are female. And let's see if that is really true. So we have female entrepreneurs here, like Annelies van den Belt. She's the CEO of SUP, the largest online publisher in Russia. With assets like Gazeta, a news website, or LiveJournal, which is also owned by everyone. You know LiveJournal, the blogging service. And also a sports website like Championat. And you have something like 50% reach in Russia.
Through our media sites. We own 4 media sites and also a car site. It's about 55% right now. 55% of all internet users in Russia come to one of our sites at least, once a month.
And we have Sarah Öhrvall of Borchert, who is responsible also for the whole R&D department there at the Borchert Group with 175, I think, different companies and 10,000 people working for Borchert. And you had something like net fame when the the famous Bonnier study of what will come on these devices showed up, the Mac Plus presentation. Maybe we come back to that later. And we have Linda Abraham, one of the co-founders of comScore, the famous net rating company. And we have Katharina Borchert, who used to be a famous German blogger and then went into management at WAZ Group, the biggest regional publisher, and now is CEO of Spiegel Online, the news website. And Daphne Wu is from China. And she has a really amazing story. We'll talk about that later. She's running a new business, Caijing. Say it, please.
The magazine?
Yeah.
The previous magazine I worked for, you mean?
Yeah, and so the whole management and 90% of the editorial staff quit end of last year, and you founded a new startup, and now you're here and hope to be profitable end of the year?
I don't think so.
So we will talk a little bit about how women use digital media, because that's the foundation of what we'll talk later. And Linda shows us some data that wasn't published, isn't published yet, about how women use digital media on a global scale. So please.
Is this on?
No sound.
Do I need to turn this on?
Take mine.
Hi there. So yes, I'm Linda Abraham with comScore, and when I was asked to speak on the panel here, I was actually quite happy to do it. At comScore, we have kind of an ocean of data, basically, from, we track internet trends across the world, and one of the very interesting things that you know, this speaking on this panel led to was the paper that we're going to study, going to publish in a few weeks. And I was actually just fascinated, both being a woman and being in digital media, what some of the results were, and I think some of them were surprising. So I wanted to just give you a few highlights, and in terms of the best way to do that, I thought maybe dispelling some myths would be useful. The first of which is that men are more engaged online. I think it's largely thought to be true that men were sort of the early adopters on the internet, and you know, maybe perhaps that they are more engaged. And one of the big things that we found in this study that was actually not true, and that's on a global basis. So the data here shows that if you look at the total internet population, it's in fact more male-oriented, but that's in large part because in some of the less developed countries, India, some places in Asia, where the infrastructure is not quite there, the online penetration of women isn't what it is in some of the more developed areas. But if you look at what happens once women get online, they actually are more engaged. They spend more time on the internet, and this is something that is not just true in the US or in Europe. This is a global number that you're looking at, and it's certainly something that was not true when the internet first started, but something that's new and certainly something that we need to really understand as an industry. Secondly, myth that men spend more money online. The role of women in the buying process has been something that's long been studied. And this doesn't necessarily get into the motivations or the process, but basically what this tells you is when a transaction is made, was it made by a man or a woman? And very interestingly, we found that if you look at the total population, say in the US, where the internet commerce market is very developed, half of the users are men, half the users are women. But in terms of the transactions, there's actually 58% of them that are generated by women. So women are clearly controlling a disproportionate share of dollars when it comes to online spending, which has a lot of implications both for people who sell online and communicate online or advertise online in any way. Third, social networking, and is the myth that men and women are equally engaged, or is there a difference? And in fact, we found that there were huge differences. This was probably one of the most consistent findings as we looked at it throughout 40 countries. And we found that women spend an average of 16% of their time online on social networks. And what's very interesting to me is that if you look at this over time, social networking is taking on an increasing proportion of the total time for women, much more so than it is for men. So not only is it more important, but on a trended basis, it's becoming more important. And so this was very, very consistent regardless of the age group that you looked at, regardless of the country that you looked at. And in terms of overall norms across regions, we found that places in Asia, for example, both men and women in Asia spend less time on social networking, but even within that mix, women still spend more. So this was really a global finding. In terms of online video, I think it's women obviously are very into entertainment and you know, as are men, but I think the myth of that women watch it more often is actually not true. Women are less engaged in online video, and that's a you know, perhaps a surprise, but they actually spend a much larger portion of their time on YouTube. So the myth was sort of mixed there, and differences were most pronounced in places where the video market is most developed. And then lastly, mobile trends. Can we expect that mobile internet trends are going to mirror the what we've seen on the PC internet? And the answer is not yet. This is a place where women are actually lagging pretty significantly in terms of smartphone usage, smartphone development of the internet. You can see the skews here that basically 65 to 70% of the smartphones are currently owned by men. I think probably the reason for this has a lot to do with availability of data plans and you know, the financial aspect of what it takes to fund a smartphone. And as those barriers begin to come down, that could change. But that's certainly where things are today. So you know, the bottom line is that women are playing a much bigger role in terms of consuming content on the internet than perhaps we understand as an industry. Once they do connect, they really engage. And then once they engage, they really adopt some of these new technologies, they embrace them. And then it's really important that we understand as an industry that they're really driving this. And I think the interesting question is, does their consumption really match the women and women's role in management of digital media companies, which are really largely, you know, still to this day dominated by men. So I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that. Thanks.
So thank you. By the way, when will you publish the paper on this? In 2 weeks, okay. So it's quite interesting what you say is that women embrace social networking much stronger than men. How come?
Well, that's, I think, the million-dollar question. I think it's
so
really,
are we running into cliches here? Women like to chat or something?
Well, I think that a couple of hypotheses. One, when social networking fills a particular need for women, as I said, they really embrace it and they use it. So, for example, one of the things that women were very early adopters of was photo sharing, and that was one of when that first became available, it was unbelievable how much that skewed female. And I think it's because that, and maybe thanks to Katerina, you know, really tapped into something that women wanted to do, and they readily embraced it and basically made that space take off. So I think that social networking generally fills that kind of a need. I think there's a lot of information sharing, there's a lot of, and you know, chatting is certainly a part of it, but there's a lot of, you know, very important and very specific information sharing that happens over social networks, and I think that it fills that need for women. And certainly the fact that it was so global. I mean, we looked at this across demographic groups, across countries. We looked at 40 different countries. Every single time, women were more engaged than men. And I found that actually very interesting from sort of a cultural anthropology standpoint.
You also had a close look on Twitter. And I found it quite interesting that you found out that, if I get it right, men write tweets and women just try to find things to shop or to, you know, find information on Twitter. Is that correct? So they use the same social network in different ways.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. If you look at the adoption rate of Twitter, it was actually fairly split between women and men. But we also did a survey and asked women why they used Twitter. And it was actually quite different. So the motivations for adopting the new technologies are quite different because they fill different needs. And when we asked people why they use Twitter, we mentioned all the things that you would think, you know, information sharing, shopping, getting a message out, you know, spreading news. And the biggest bucket for women was sort of the unidentified bucket. In other words, of all the things that we asked them, they didn't check any of those boxes. So there's still a lot more that we need to understand about what kind of utility women are getting from this, because they certainly are adapting at a very aggressive rate.
I won't force you to explain why Bing is more female than Google. You don't know yet. We had a discussion about that because we just don't know. Do you know?
No, we don't know, but I have a hypothesis that one of the things that we looked at was searching activity, and we found out that although Google is the most popular search engine, this is in the US, by the way, so Google is most popular overall. If you look at some of the other search engines, women search more on those other search engines than men do. So if you look at the number of searches performed per searcher, Bing certainly was preferred by a wide margin, and women search more on Bing. And so the hypothesis, I have to investigate this, but would be that when women use IE, that is, Bing is a default browser, and I wonder if women are less likely to experiment with different kinds of browsers and use different technologies, and maybe more of a tendency to use the default rather than aggressively develop a preference for something different.
Yeah. I want to come back to the point that, well, women are embracing social networks, but maybe they're using them in another way. So you mentioned that LiveJournal has something to 80 to 90% female users in the US. And I just wanted to ask Katharina, who used to be a famous German blogger, that also in Germany we have this debate about many women using blogs, but at the end the A-list bloggers seem mainly to be men. So you were one of the few exceptions. How come?
Had such a large male readership. I don't know. I think, and I'm sorry to get into that bad gender stereotyping again. But yeah, I can't help it. But in my experience, women use, no matter whether it's any kind of social network or blogging, it's more to engage with other people and to share, whereas many men use it as a platform to voice their ideas and thoughts. And at least in my experience, unfortunately, men are a lot more opinionated, are a lot more vocal. They just have the stronger voice. They like flame wars. They actually like putting themselves out there, and we find that lacking in many women, unfortunately.
So you switched to management of major media outlets now. So what's your feeling about, men dominating this sphere? I had the feeling that there are a lot of women driving this space, and we had a one-day ongoing discussion about that point, and the whole panel disagrees. So all these women tell me all the time there are no female managers dominating the field. How come?
I mean, I think it's partly to do with a lack of female role models. When I started out, I was, yeah, but we're not the norm. It's not that there are that many out there. You have to go and actively look for women. And I remember when, and it's not like I've been in business for very long, but I found it incredibly difficult when I started out, not having a single female role model to look to and figure out how that thing works as a woman. Because quite obviously, in most of your daily business, people still look at you, and obviously the fact that you're a woman, and oftentimes the only woman, still factors in how you're dealt with. And I think a lack of role models is still a problem, because oftentimes you do need women to encourage other women to take that path and actually go there.
I'm sorry, but I think it's a cultural thing as well, because we talked about it over lunch, where Daphne sort of said, women, I mean, to me it doesn't really make a difference whether it's a woman running a media company or a man running a media company. I'm Dutch, but I run a media company in Russia, and I did that in the 90s, left to go to the UK and then came back. And when I clearly remember when I started working in the UK for News International, for the first time I thought, wow, I'm a woman working. Because never in those 6 years working in Russia did I ever, and I had managerial positions, but I never really saw myself as a female colleague. I saw myself as a colleague. So, and I mean, what I see in Russia, which is still a large part of the world, is that it's much less of an issue. I was tweeting this morning to some of my followers that how do I ever explain this to my Russian colleagues, what we're discussing right now. But you know, that's maybe also because I'm glass half full rather than glass half empty, and maybe I just want to not acknowledge it.
Okay, so
it's very hard in Germany not to acknowledge it because you're asked the entire time. And then whenever you give an interview, somebody comes up and it's always at least the second question. So what's it like as a woman? Oh, I don't know. You know, I get up and get dressed and go to the office. And then somebody starts writing about my glasses and about my hair. They never do that with men. So it really still seems to matter whether you want to acknowledge it or not. Yeah.
So we have another big exception of the role model here, because you are the second most dangerous woman in China. So the most, yeah, that's what the press says. So Hu Shuli, the co-founder of your media outlet, was labeled the most dangerous person there.
I'm the second most dangerous woman.
So you are the general manager, so you're the second most dangerous woman there. You have to tell us in a nutshell what happened to your media company, yeah? And about the switch and founding a new one. And which is unusual, that the top managers are female, it's in China, which is politically complicated. So just tell us in a minute what happened.
And I just want to clear that up. There's no mentioning whatsoever of me being the second most dangerous woman.
No, that's... yeah.
And even to our editor, I think you're referring to our editor-in-chief, who is the lady named Hu Shuli, who is basically the woman who has been pioneering the independent journalism in China. And she's been international acknowledged and recognized. And so we sort of were partners, you know, previously. We were, she's on editorial side, I'm on business side. Actually, on media business side, I have to say, just to add on, how a woman sort of come along in the business sector, in managerial areas. I think in China, media sector in the broader sense, like media, advertising, PR, there are a lot of women, senior level, and there are a lot of women managers. I never really thought about this, like, what do you think to be a woman in a managerial position? I never thought about that. However, I think in editorial side, this is still very rare. And so my partner, Ms. Hu Shuli, has been quite a figure in that area. And I think she's a very, I should say, courageous woman and very, very brilliant to that sense. So I think the reason why we left is of course, there's a long time disagreement with our shareholders in that way. So as management, we feel it's time eventually to say, well, why don't we start our own business along with our team? Because I think in that sense, under Shuli's, Ms. Hu's leadership, the team has been very loyal. I don't know whether that has to do anything to do with women or not, but it's a very loyal team and very dedicated team. So we established a new company, Caixin Media, last December altogether. So that's how what you've been referring to. We left and we start our own business. It's a bold move, but we are very confident that we can build up something, you know, along with our team members or that. So this is just to answer your question, whether it's satisfactory or not.
Thank you. So, Annelies, we were discussing yesterday after 2 glasses of wine, I think, what could be the impact of women managers on the media business. And you told me that maybe we are, so we hate all this gender discussion, just a standard disclaimer, but when you look at it, maybe we are more user-centric, so we are much more interested in what makes really sense to user and not in this, you know, feature freak world.
Yeah, and I think because I'm a traditional media girl, I worked in newspapers and in TV as well. Also, but always in roles where I try to implement digital into those traditional places. And what I see the switches, and I see this now as well, running a blogging platform, the switches from the user now decides what they want to read, what they want to write, and we're coming from a world where the editor in the corner office decide what the reader needs to read. And I think, therefore, a lot of the attention needs to switch from what that one person in the corner, in many cases, a man, although you have lots of very successful female editors, and it's obviously not just one person, but what that person who's more looking inside rather than outside decides how the user needs, or how the reader needs to consume his media, to actually the user themselves deciding what they want to see. And I think that creates a huge shift in navigation, user journey. I think women are, and I don't like stereotypes, but I can only look at myself. I am the consumer in my company, and in particular because technology is still built by male developers. We still don't see enough female developers, people who actually code, who write requirements. That's still a male-dominated world. And at the end of the line, but also at the beginning of the line, you need to have a female perspective, is my view. Not very scientific, but it works.
There's a huge impact on this market at the moment by the female consumership, and you're responsible for the iPad development in Borchert, which is quite famous, and you're based in California doing a lot of stuff on the pad at the moment. And we have the feeling that a lot more women buy these kinds of products than they used to buy technology before. How come?
Well, we don't really know. We know that the Kindle was adopted by women at a much higher rate than was expected. Then again, everyone expects young guys to quickly adopt all sorts of technology because it's just some sort of perception we have of the world. But it seems like there are no numbers released on the iPad yet, so we don't know. But the information we get so far is that there is a lot of female usage. But it is, I mean, the new screens, what's so interesting with those products is I think they're like the first pieces of technology that you want to cuddle up with in your couch. They're sort of very intimate and they're very intuitive.
Is this the female way to use technology, or?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is an impossible position for a male moderator, as you may imagine here.
You know, they sold 2 million devices in a very short time period, so I think there are quite many who like that sort of technology.
We don't have to show off. You know, we don't have to show to our friends that we have this device. We can just cuddle up with it.
Cuddle. But the interesting thing, though, I think the other side of the story is obviously we have now 5 billion downloads of apps, and there are just a huge number of apps sold all the time. And we have, on average, people use their apps around 60 minutes per day, up to 70, dependent on the target group. That's much more than we spend reading newspapers or magazines or books, any sorts of media, except for TV. So that's clearly the future of media. Now, I went to the Worldwide Developers Conference by Apple on Monday, and you would assume that among the 5,000 people who were there, this is the future of media, you'll see a lot of entrepreneurs who would be women or sort of jumping the train because here are all the new positionings that are going to open up. And I can assure you that there were no women whatsoever in that conference. It's like totally male, and speaking about clothes, they all have jeans and black t-shirt and to look like Steve.
Okay.
And then the first time I saw a woman that was on the screen, because then they were advertising, you know, this new FaceTime feature on the iPhone 4, where you do video conferencing, and you could see all these happy mothers with cuddling their cute kids, doing like video conference to, guess who? The working father. And they were sending text message or video messages doing ultrasounds to their busy father who was on a business trip because he couldn't join to the ultrasound. And you just felt, God, is this the future of the media? Like, where are we? This is where the women should be.
But that's exactly, sorry to interrupt, that's exactly the discussion we had last night when Linda showed us her figures of how much women engage on the net and how many different services they use and how actively they use it. But still, the services are shaped and managed by men. Where are the women?
Yeah, and actually it's even worse because it's looking at the numbers of women who are finishing a degree in computer science, it's dropped from like 37% women down to 18 in the US. And the number of women who have an IT-related job are down from like 36% to 24%. So we do see, not only is it a low volume, it's also decreasing. And that's, I think, considering that this is such a huge opportunity, it's not good.
What does that mean for a company like Borchert? So you are in the happy position of being female, but so take another media company which is male dominated when it comes to R&D. What does that mean for the strategic vision of such companies?
To not have women, not have as good business ideas, obviously. I know we get a lot of ideas, business ideas presented to us being an R&D department. I think one thing that's really interesting when there's a male entrepreneur compared to a female is that the ideas that are founded by women quite often are much more based in solving real needs for real people in like real life. It's very much sort of here and now, whereas the male ideas tend to be geeky, clever technology ideas for geeky people. This is really like exaggerating a lot the differences, but there is, I think, certainly that you need that mix, and it's proven over and over and over again that mixed creative teams innovate better products. So the combination is always better.
It could also be that founding new businesses may be very important, so founding little startups, and we had this discussion about is the VC scene dominated by men? So,
listening to this conversation, it's so interesting. It made me think back to when I first got out of school. My degree was in quantitative analysis, and I started at Procter & Gamble doing marketing analysis. My very first ride up on the elevator, I was with 4 men, and they were all in deep discussions about sanitary napkins. And I thought, this is really going to be a trip, And so, here I am all these years later. We were discussing this last night, looking at some of the data that we talked about here today. And we do a lot with the startup community. And, we listen to people give pitches, or we understand, the different aspects of development that are taking place. And I'm just, to your point, it's, where are the women? And I think about role models. I think if there's one thing coming out of this conference, I'd really love to see a more aggressive outreach of mentoring, because it's a critical component to changing things. And I think, not just because we should do it, but because there are business results to be had. And I think this data really underscores that.
Okay, so you mentioned the Stanford blacklists of VCs never ever founding a female startup. Can you tell them?
No, I went to this conference at Stanford, and there was a woman who was an entrepreneur, and she, together with other female entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, which is like 1% of all entrepreneurs are female, they made this blacklist about VCs, that never ever funded a startup by a woman, and they were sort of spreading it around, sort of just to make sure, like, don't waste your time, don't go there. But I think I just want to add, I think it's not only, it's a VC problem because they don't acknowledge women, but it's also within us as being women. That just saw this research that 60% of all men in executive positions would call themselves innovative. But among women, it would be 30%. So we don't believe that we have great ideas, even though obviously we do. Obviously we're as innovative, but I just think there's a lot of self-confidence that's needed.
So this seems to be a leitmotif of every panel on this conference, that women underscore themselves. So,
yeah, thinking back again about the theme of today, and not just about women in leading positions in media companies, but also about the future of media. One of the big changes I think we need to see, not only amongst ourselves in our own companies, but also in working with the wider world, i.e. the advertising community, is to get them to accept that the changes in media are going to be driven, or are being driven, by women. You mentioned LiveJournal, 90% of the users in the US are women. In Russia right now, we've just had a tipping point of over 50%. And it's women who now actually decide what they want to do on the web, how they communicate with their friends. I mean, all your numbers, Linda, and I think that will have to have a huge impact, or needs to have a huge impact in how money is being spent on media in general, because you still have huge discrepancies between how agencies spend money on media and how actually we think they should be spending money on media, and actually how to reach their proper target audience. And I would say, look at what's happening on the web.
Maybe you should talk the last 7 minutes and 46 seconds about the future of media without any female part in it. There's one other leitmotif on this panel. We are all into quality content, and at least here in Europe, also in the US, we have a big debate about how do we finance high quality content in the future. This is the major topic these days. And I'm quite impressed about China and Russia, where I have the feeling that original reporting and producing high quality content is really a rapidly growing business model at the moment.
It is, but it's in Russia because we saw the growth of the web came through copycats, i.e. people copying Hotmail, copying Classmates. So the first 6 large sites in Russia are all copycats of something that was already happening in the West. We're number 7, but we employ lots of journalists, and therefore we call ourselves quality digital publishers. It is fast growing because of advertisers want to reach people who are relevant for their products. I mean, and that's our approach as a business, but it seems to work because we get more dollars spent on the web, more dollars spent with us, but also with other places, and we really try to take it away from a sort of commodity place where you spend your rest dollars to a place where you really start to engage with people. And as we know, women engage very much, and actually women drive many of the purchases. We believe that's, and the proof is there, that we can actually get quality spend on the web. So for us, and that's not the one size fits all. It's not just advertising dollars, because at the same time we see very interesting areas where for pay to view. But no, we're not going to put stuff behind walls of you have to stop here now because now you have to pay. We still believe very much in advertising. It's probably part of the market as well, in terms of it's a young market. People still need a lot of education about products. Some brands still need to be promoted to people. Some products still need to be heavily promoted. So it's a good market for a marketeer.
Daphne, perhaps you could comment on something.
Yeah, sure. I think when you say quality journalism, there is a debate whether quality journalism could survive or even win in the new media era. I think usually people would think quality journalism equals to traditional media. I think very much so in the States and even in China. Print media or traditional media is on decline, and in terms of revenue generated through advertising and circulation. And I believe a sort of a combination of new media and old media. I.e., I think we still believe in China magazine because we publish magazine, we have website, we have video programs on the web, and we organize conferences and events, all that kind of business, dedicating to providing quality information on financial and business sector to our audience. So I believe that first of all, magazine in China still have a lot of room to grow, because magazine is still very new in China. It's underdeveloped, and they are accounted for a very small portion of the share in terms of advertising revenue. Good quality magazines are still very rare in China. But on the other hand, we have to get prepared for internet, for mobile internet, for all kinds of channels the technology would bring to us. So I think our company, although it's very new, we have had experience in magazines for like 12 years, and for the past 12 years. And when we start the business last December, we basically start all together on the different media platforms in terms of magazines, website, and video, as well as conference and events all together, because we believe It's a time, or it will be a time that people will not say you are new media or traditional media. It's about quality media or less quality media, or or you have different kind of position for your audience, or the products will have kind of a different positioning. That's it. It's not. We believe in quality journalism in whatever media platform it may be. So I think what we have to do as a media company is to deliver the quality content to our audience, to wherever they want and whenever they want. That's the goal.
Katharina, what would you say? So we are running media outlets which are based on quality journalism, and the least we could say that at the moment we are not growing in terms of ad revenues. So what's your view on the future of quality media?
I absolutely believe that quality journalism has a future on the web, otherwise I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, but getting a different job. We're in a difficult position right now, and I wouldn't bet on every single player surviving the next 5 years, but I think there is a big demand for more than just aggregated agency news, for strong original voices and strong reporting, and the demand will definitely grow. And I also believe that us betting on keeping it free and financing it by ad revenues is the right way.
Linda, what do the data say about, quality websites compared to all these huge growing outlets with stuff?
Well, I think, in terms of what the data say, it basically says that there, I think, are room for multiple kinds of models. I think that, I absolutely think advertising is going to continue to play a role for many, but we are seeing some major publications put up paywalls, and we don't know how that's going to go yet. The jury is still out. But I actually see a lot of experimentation in the next 5 years, and I think we have to be watching the different models that evolve carefully. But I actually think 5 years from now, we will have some mix. It will not be, I think the day that advertising funded everything, I think those days are gone. But I actually think that, and I do think people will, at some level, pay for quality content, and they are beginning to understand that they either pay for it through advertising or, or a subscription. But I think that we, as a society, value quality journalism so much that if push came to shove, some of those models will work in some cases, and others will work in other cases. But I think that it'll be a combination of advertising and consumer funding. But I'm personally very concerned about the future of quality journalism, because I think it's what makes us tick as a society. And so I think we have to continue to push the envelope and try new things, learn, experiment, take risks, try.
So we have to try a lot of things. Do you think that this thing may be the starting point of a kind of new media sphere, or is it just another gadget?
That you cuddle with. No, I truly believe in qualitative journalism, and I believe that device will help us, because we do see clearly in research that people are getting a bit tired of the endlessness of the web, that always you have to search to find something, and if you find it, you're not sure of the quality of it. And we did these focus groups among newspaper readers. We did find a few still out there. And one thing they said to us, that why they love their newspaper is because they finish it. Like in the morning, they could say, I read my newspaper. And you can never say that with a website. It's sort of, I never read the website. It just goes on and on and on, and you're never sure if you've sort of covered the most important things of the day. And I think that's what the media companies have to come back to, like in digital devices, publish curated stories that has a beginning and that has an end, and that is clearly selected for the audience and packaged in a nice way. And with that device you have on the table, it's much easier to present in a very attractive way. So I think, yeah, that's the starting point of at least an opportunity that media companies have.
But it's not the. I always say to people that the future of media, starts today. It doesn't start, and it doesn't finish in 5 years' time. It's not. It's an iterative process. It's not a plan you have that in 3 years' time our company is going to be new Web 2.0, or by that time Web 3.0. And for me, it represents much more a shift from traditional planned way, your 12-month plan, your 18-month plan, to the iterative planning process we're going through. Because if we don't become iterative as people running media businesses, our users definitely will. And in so many cases now the whole world's talking about Twitter, but which serious media company embraced Twitter before its users or its readers were embracing it? And I think we need to be much more looking outside rather than inside. We need to be looking outside of our traditional competitive set. I always say websites are not my competitors. Actually, TV channels are my competitors because they have a much higher audience. And it's about this sort of always on. And I hate to say that because obviously in an hour we're going to have this opportunity to be off for a while and be silent, but it's definitely how can you as a company continue to be relevant, because it's the iPad now, but in 6 months' time it's something else.
So dear women in the audience, look at all these role models here, go into media and reinvent them, that I have a job next year and in 10 years in media business, please. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much that I could show off my iPad. So thank you.